I'm John Carson. I am the Chief of Staff at the White House Council on Environmental Quality, and I hope all of you are excited to be here today, but probably not half as excited as I am to get to spend this time with all of you. We have held a number of stakeholder events here at the White House to talk about this crucial issue and the clean energy economy, the vision that we all share for that. But I think there's no group that we've been more excited to have here, and I think that is the reason why we're having more members of the President's Cabinet here today than we've had for any other single stakeholders event. We'll be hearing from later today Secretary Chu, Secretary Salazar, Secretary Solis, Administrator Jackson of the EPA, and my boss at the Council on Environmental Quality, Nancy Sutley. I think that's for two reasons. We all in this administration and so many people across the country share this vision of what the clean energy economy can be, where we know we can take this country. But this is the group that is going to live in that world. You either will get to live in that world if we achieve what we need to get done, or you won't. So the stakes are higher for you than any of the other groups that we've met with. But you are also the group that we need, most importantly, to partner with us. You are the group that hold the power in your hands to either make this a reality or not. So I think that's why we have so much excitement here today, such a great turnout from our cabinet. At the end of our time together today, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but what I wanted to say at the beginning, as you're listening to the members of the President's Cabinet talk today, as you're asking questions, I hope what you'll focus on and what our intention is for this event is to help you be partners with us. How are we going to get to that vision we all have of a clean energy economy, and how can we work with you to help make that happen? So to kick things off today, we are going to, I think part of today you will learn about the many different offices that are working on this in the administration. And one of the key ones is the office that Carol Browner leads, the Office of Energy and Climate Change. And here from OECC, as we call it, you'll probably hear lots of acronyms today. Just make a note and someone will tell you what those mean later on. But here from the Office of Energy and Climate Change is their counselor in that office, Jody Freeman.
Well, hello, welcome to all of you. I'm here on behalf of my boss, Carol Browner, who, if she were here, would welcome you and say, just as John said, that you are the generation that's going to take up the beginnings, the launch that we have been able to succeed in and take it to the next level. So we're glad you're here. We're glad you're so engaged. I'll just say a few words before I introduce Nancy Sutley about what I think a fair assessment would say is a very impressive set of accomplishments in the first year of the administration. If you think about what we've been able to do in a fairly short time, it's hard not to be impressed with the sheer ambition and the scope of it. If you think about how we've used existing authority from setting historic appliance efficiency standards to a historic first set of greenhouse gas emission standards for cars and trucks, we have been making steady progress just by using the authorities that have been laying dormant for so long. And in addition, perhaps most importantly at the moment, as we head into Copenhagen, we have succeeded for the first time, the United States Congress, for the first time, we saw a bill come out of the House of Representatives, the first ever bill aimed at creating a system for controlling the emissions of carbon that are so dangerous for our planet and spurring a clean energy technology revolution. That happened this summer, as you all know. And here in the White House, there was, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, there was a real sense of history and excitement at that moment. And we moved then on to the Senate. And even though the pages of the newspaper are full of discussions about health care, don't be fooled for a minute in thinking that we have stopped moving on energy and climate change legislation. The President has been insistent from the beginning that we put together, and he's called on Congress to put together a comprehensive energy and climate package that would spur new green jobs and technological innovation and control dangerous carbon pollution, and that's exactly what we are working hard on, what the Senate is clearly working hard on. As some of you may know, there are several committees in the Senate that have a piece of crafting the legislation, and that is moving along. And as the President has said, when we finish health care, we will turn to comprehensive energy and climate change. As we pursue this, we are heading into the Copenhagen negotiations. And we have seen a lot of activity in just the last week alone. As you know, the President has announced for the first time a number to put on the table for the conversation in the range of 17%. We saw the Chinese respond with their own number tied to business as usual, a carbon intensity reduction number. And we saw then just last night India add to the mix. So you're seeing, moving forward now on the eve of Copenhagen, a real momentum toward making progress in a complicated discussion about a number of issues. A number of issues that were not on the table in the Kyoto discussions years ago, which make it challenging and important for us to make progress. That is, mitigation, of course, cutting emissions, but also adaptation, financing, and technology. And we have to do on all of these things, we have to make on all of these issues great progress in Copenhagen. All of the major economies of the world, developed and emerging, must make commitments, serious commitments that they will stand behind domestically. And that is what is before us. We will make progress, and ultimately we will achieve a binding legal agreement, though I think it's fair to say that we don't expect to achieve that all in one fell swoop at Copenhagen itself. But we have built tremendous momentum domestically toward Copenhagen. We have a lot to offer in those discussions. We have a lot to be proud of as we go into those discussions. And then we will see how that momentum comes back home and helps to energize our own Congress and our own efforts to pass, finally, a comprehensive bill. So I am excited about this. You should be excited about this. And I will now pass things on to Nancy Sutley, the chair of the Council on Environmental Quality. I almost called her the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, which is totally different, and I don't think Nancy wants to be that. Nancy is, like me, hails from California and is one of the people in government that you really come to admire greatly. She is a serious thinker on a whole range of issues that matter to you and matter to us. Everything from transmission siting to oceans policy is going on in the head of Nancy Sutley. She is responsible for coordinating a tremendous number of policies across a vast number of agencies and runs a wonderful shop at CEQ. We have the pleasure of interacting, the Office of Energy and Climate Change, on a regular basis with Nancy and her staff. Again, I have nothing but admiration for her, and I'm glad you get a chance to hear from her. Nancy Sutley.
That's much better. Unlike Jody, I do need one of these, but thanks for that nice introduction, and welcome everyone to the White House. And we're very, very excited to have you here today. All of you who are here in person, and those of you who are participating via the live web stream and on Facebook. And so welcome, and welcome our future leaders. And you know, it might be hard to imagine, but I think everyone you will hear from today, all the administration officials, all the people who are in charge of making policy in this area, in this country, were in your shoes one day. And when I was starting out in this area a long time ago, these issues were not front and center. They were kind of important to a small group of people, but what's really happened over the last 15 years is that these energy issues, climate issues, environmental issues have really become front and center in the minds of the American people, in the minds of policymakers, and in large part because young people have brought them to the fore. So you here in this audience represent so many across the nation who are engaged, active, and involved in these incredibly critical issues. And we know that the future of our country, and in fact the future of the planet, and of our economy and a clean energy economy, are largely in your hands. And the good news for all of you, I hope, is that we share that vision, a vision of a brighter future, one powered by clean energy, one that is environmentally sound, that our communities are protected and healthy, and offers a prosperous vision of the United States to come. A couple of weeks ago, I was fortunate enough to visit my alma mater, Cornell University, and interact with students and entrepreneurs from across the country who had come to Cornell for a conference. It was really incredible to see the level of energy in the room of students and entrepreneurs and people interested in sustainable enterprise and in environmental stewardship, and in thinking about their futures in a way that promotes a green vision where the jobs that are created in the future will be clean energy jobs, and that there are opportunities in high technology and medium technology and low technology ways to make our planet greener and more sustainable. I met a lot of really impressive people when I was there, but we know across the country there are young and enthusiastic people working on these issues, whether it's in my home in Los Angeles, young activists working to clean up the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, which pollute their communities. When I was in New Orleans with the president and he spoke, a young woman in the audience in the sort of aftermath of Katrina and lots of concern about recovery there, the question she asked was, what were we doing about the environment, and how could we help the people of New Orleans clean up their environment? So there are examples of an extraordinary level of commitment and work and innovation from young people, and that's and we can see examples of how it's capable of making real change in the energy and environment sector of our country, and that this is an effort that's popping up in every state throughout the nation. We know one of the most serious threats that we face is climate change. And while we're taking significant actions to address this challenge now, your generation will be critical to building this clean energy economy. So today, you'll hear from the highest level of the administration, officials who are working hard every day to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to advance clean energy, to increase our energy security, and to invest in a green recovery. And as you just heard from Jody, we're engaging very vigorously in the international discussions leading up to Copenhagen and beyond. And one thing Jody didn't mention, but I'm sure you all know, is that the President will attend the climate negotiations in Copenhagen next week. On the domestic front, so we're very excited that he's going, and know that it will make a tremendous, it will help tremendously to pull the world community together to reach some understandings about how we have to move forward as a global community. And on the domestic front, over these last 10 months, our efforts to combat climate change and to lay the foundation for a clean energy economy have been very vigorous, to say the least. The administration, under the President's active leadership and his active engagement, has made very significant progress in addressing climate change and accelerating a clean energy renaissance. The U.S. is investing more than $80 billion in clean energy through the Recovery Act, which is the largest ever investment in clean energy, including the largest investment ever in renewable energy, to double our ability to produce clean renewable energy like wind and solar, and to create good clean energy jobs. This spring, the President announced the first ever joint fuel economy greenhouse gas emission standards for cars and trucks, one of the major sources of greenhouse gas emissions, and a projected savings of 1.8 billion barrels of oil over the life of the program. The administration has forged ahead with more stringent energy efficiency standards for commercial and residential appliances, and we focused on retrofitting homes, not just with money in the Recovery Act for weatherization, but on longer-term solutions that create a marketplace for the retrofit industry, making home energy retrofits a pathway to save energy for all Americans and to create jobs. We're also leading by example by making the federal government itself cleaner and greener throughout its operations. The President in October signed a sustainability executive order that calls on all federal agencies to improve their environmental, energy, and economic performance, and includes setting an ambitious 2020 greenhouse gas pollution reduction target for the federal government in the next month. And as you all know, at the top of the President's agenda is advancing comprehensive energy and climate legislation. These are just a few examples of things we've done in this 1 year. And I think I'm running out of time for now. But I can assure you that, that we're working very hard every day to realize this vision for the future. And as you'll see in a few moments, we have an incredibly talented set of dedicated leaders in our cabinet to help. So I thank you all for being here. I thank you all for everything you're doing to make this issue where it is on the national agenda and to help us get to a vision of a cleaner and greener future for our country. So I have the privilege now of introducing the Secretary of Energy, Steve Chu, who's doing incredible work. In addition to being a Nobel laureate, he is one of the leading thinkers on advanced energy technologies, clean energy technologies, and I don't know if he has his laptop with him and show a few charts and graphs. No, not today. He's always ready to whip out a few good charts and graphs, but I think you'll be hearing some very interesting things from our distinguished Secretary of Energy, Steve Chu.
Reminded Nancy by that introduction and the experience in Blazing Saddles. Let me whip out my personal computer. Anyway, is that on tape? So let me talk about. I did. Anyway, let me start again. Okay, I see many facets of the energy debate. There are, I think, a pathway to a great economic opportunity. If I think about what I saw in China and its change over the last couple of years, 2.5 months ago, Secretary Locke and I, Secretary of Commerce and I, went to China and we talked with Premier of China, Wen Jiabao, for 45 minutes, an hour, and also the Vice Premier and people on further down the line. And for the first time, I heard the Premier of China saying, climate change to China, if we continue a business as usual model, climate change will be devastating to China, to the rest of the world. China's use of coal is unsustainable. Its increase in carbon dioxide emissions is unsustainable. So we have to diversify our energy supply. We have to clean it up as aggressively. We have to drive energy efficiency. 2.5 years ago, I had a similar discussion with the Premier about what they were doing, and they talked about energy efficiency, but they weren't ready to acknowledge the consequences of climate change. This year, they're talking about it, but they're also saying something else. We're going to invest in energy, and it's very clear from their actions. We're talking about over $100 billion a year as a start. This is not token stuff. $88 billion on a super high voltage DC and AC transmission line system, $88 billion by 2020. Because they want to become a world leader in clean energy technologies. So they see economic prosperity in going in this direction because they see that In the end, and as if those of you are paying attention to how rapidly the situation is changing, in the end, we will be living in a carbon-constrained world, because as the years go by, the evidence of climate change is becoming more apparent, or the dangers of it are becoming more apparent. And just as we now begin to realize that the dream of having the price of oil return back to $30 a barrel is highly unlikely, because the oil reserves of the non-Arabian Peninsula are shifting now to much more expensive areas that you have to go to get the oil. A lot of it is now shifting to offshore, deep offshore oil, very expensive, recovered. So the price of oil will be more, the demand will be higher. We will be living in a carbon-constrained world because of the mounting evidence that we run severe risks in climate change. So China says, okay, that's where the world's going to be. Why don't we take a leadership position along that? And it reminds me of when people asked Wayne Gretzky why was he such a great hockey player, he said, and many of you may know this, he said, I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it's been. And so China is anticipating where the puck's going to be, and they're going there. Now, what should the United States do? Should we wish that perhaps we will turn back to $30 oil, or maybe we should say, well, we're not really sure, let other countries go first, and then maybe we'll follow. But if we do take that attitude, we will be playing catch-up. Just as we are playing catch-up with energy-efficient cars, and just as we did play catch-up with much more reliable cars. It conflicted with the current business model of having Americans buy a car every 3 or 5 years. But once companies started building cars that lasted 10, 15 years, consumers started buying those cars. And so what I'm saying is that the world will be passing us by if we don't take the opportunity. Now, the bright side is, if we take this opportunity, I am convinced that there is no innovation machine and there is no R&D machinery in our university system and our ability to transform ideas into innovation into the private sector better than the United States, if there's direction given with policy that affects this. Now, what is the direction for this policy? I will go back to climate change, that we've got to begin to decrease our emission of carbon dioxide as soon as possible. And the President has said that, based on climate science, that developed countries really have to get their carbon emissions down by 80% or more by mid-century. 80% is a big task. And so what do we need to do in order to get there? Well, energy efficiency is the major number one thing. Buildings consume 40% of the energy in the United States. Their current buildings can be built on a standard cost with about 30 or 40% better energy efficiency than buildings built 30 years ago. But we think you can build buildings that are cost effective, meaning those investments will pay for themselves in a very small fraction of the lifetime of either a residential home or a commercial building. So a commercial building lasts 50 or 60 years. By 20 years, your investment will pay for itself in lower energy bills. And you can save not 20, 30, 40%, but you can save 60, 70, 80%, even before the first solar cell goes on the roof. Okay, so how do you prove that? Well, we have to actually prove that it really works, it really does do that, and that's one of the things that we intend to do. So there's energy efficiency in the fleet vehicle system, energy efficiency in buildings, energy efficiency in industrial processes. The other thing we have to do is build up a renewable energy. Solar power costs a lot. It costs too much. So there have to be technologies that drive down that cost, which include non-exotic technologies. Yes, we're investing in exact thin films and things of that nature to drive down the module cost, but the module cost by 2010 will go less than $1 per installed watt. The full cost now is about $4 to $5 if it's over a wide area. If you own a Costco center and have a lot of square footage, you can put them up for $4 or $5 a watt on a big roof. If you try to do it in your home, it's going to be even more than that. Most people think that if it goes down to $1 to $2 a watt, full cost, then everything gets transformed. You don't need a subsidy anymore. Kaboom, everybody does it. So how do you get the cost down? It's a very complicated part. And the balance of system, there's a solar module, there's the mounting stuff, there's the weight of the roof, there's inverters. And right now the balance of system is more than half of the cost. So we've got to get that other stuff down. Wind is making great guns. I can go down the list, but let me point out two things that I think are important. It's going to take time to make this transition. What about coal and what about nuclear? There are people who say coal is very dirty. There's no such thing as really clean coal. You can make it cleaner, but we should avoid it. But on the flip side of that, I would say, number one, coal is very plentiful. China and India have vast coal reserves. In fact, the countries that have the highest coal reserves are the United States. We have 1/4 of all the known coal reserves in the world, followed by Russia, India, China, Australia. Those few countries contain 75% of the coal reserves. I don't think either the United States, China, India, or Russia will turn their back on coal. So one of the issues, this is something, if the United States turns its back on coal, India and China will not, and we still have a huge, huge problem. And so we, in the Department of Energy, are committed to try to get 80, 90+% of the carbon out of coal, as well as drive down for the mercury emissions, the particulate emissions, as well as the SOx and NOx. Nuclear, I also think, has to be part of it. Nuclear has issues, but they are solvable. The safety issue with the nuclear designs we have today are much, much safer. The issues in my mind, the two really significant issues are a nuclear waste issue and the proliferation issue. And I believe that both of them are actually solvable. And so because this is baseload power, as is coal, as is natural gas, it's energy on demand, we have to view these technologies as a transition forward, because we don't have the technologies today that will allow us to go beyond, let's say, 20, 25% renewables because of the variability. We need vast new transmission systems, but we also need energy storage. By the time you're at 20% wind, and I know this because the Department of Energy administers the Bonneville Power Administration, Pacific Northwest, 80% hydro, 20% wind. At 20% wind, we have to keep boilers hot, fossil fuel burning generation hot, because in case the wind stutters and stops blowing for an hour a day and sometimes up to a week, you don't want a blackout. So wind sounds great, except once you keep a boiler hot, you've lost the advantage. And that's only 20%. So you go to 40, 50%, you have to know how to store the energy in some effective way. So these are the issues. And so we have to develop all of these technologies, the energy storage, the transmission technology, in order to get the renewables to come on where they should be, because after all, the amount of energy hitting the Earth from the sun is amazing. It's a very small fraction of 1% would take care of our energy needs if we could capture that. So let me just stop there, that these are huge technical challenges, huge policy challenges, a huge issue. Cost, as the nation tries to struggle for a comprehensive energy and climate bill, it's passed the House. The Waxman-Markey bill has been estimated to cost about 48 cents a day. The cost of not doing it are twofold. The United States will have lost the opportunity to lead in a green technology revolution. So we will be playing catch up with countries in Europe, with countries like China and Japan. And the other thing is that if we continue as we're doing, and if the other countries continue as they're doing, especially China, India, and the United States, then your future I'm an old guy, but your future and your kids' future is at stake. The prediction is that we will go, in a business as usual scenario, we'll have a significant probability, 40, 50%, of going to above 4 degrees, 5 degrees centigrade. That does not sound like much, I know. But if you look at where we are today and where we were in the last of the Ice Age periods, it was 6 degrees centigrade colder on average, only 6 degrees. But at that time, Canada and the United States down in Ohio, Pennsylvania was covered year-round in ice. So 6 degrees makes a big difference. So all you have to do is say, okay, if Ohio is covered in ice year-round with 6-degree difference, what will the world look like 6 degrees hotter? It will look equally different. And that equally different world does not respect nations' boundaries. It doesn't respect anything. It doesn't respect whether this country has an agriculture and that will be wiped out or not. And I'll leave you with one final thought. Say, don't worry about it. Then you just go further north and you can grow your food. The Earth is kind of round. And you go further north, the sun comes in this way. It doesn't go in this way. It could be warmer up here, but it's not going to do you much good because you're not going to get as much sunlight. It's going to be a very different world, and we have to avoid getting to that world. Okay, with that, I refrain from whipping out my personal computer.
I'm just going to stand over here while I introduce, this is really not good. They have very tall podiums here. But thank you, Secretary Chu. And it's my honor and pleasure to introduce the Secretary of Interior, Ken Salazar, who in the Department of Interior is responsible for managing many of our public lands, about 20% of our land areas. See, I've been listening to your statistics. But it's a great pleasure to welcome the Secretary of Interior.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nancy. It's always an honor to appear with Nancy and with Stephen Chu. We are a team here in Obama land, and we work well together as we try to stand up the world on a whole variety of issues that are affecting not only our nation, but really our entire planet. I want to make 4 quick points because I know we are on a tight time schedule and I'm going to have to run out the door before too long. First, I think it's important for us to make sure that we are moving forward with the same message on what we are trying to accomplish here. And from day one, and even before day one started on this in this administration, we recognize a new energy and climate change era had to arrive. And as the President has often said, the imperatives that compel us to get there are, first of all, national security. We need to secure our nation and to free ourselves from the overdependence on foreign oil. And secondly, we need to create millions of jobs here at home as opposed to exporting our dollars and jobs overseas, which is something that Secretary Chu was talking about. And third, we need to make sure we are protecting our children and our grandchildren from the dangers of pollution, which we know are here. That is our mission, and that is what we have been working on, and we will continue to work on in the days ahead. For me, in the Department of Interior, what I have done is work on a variety of different efforts to try to deal with this challenge which the President has brought to us. I'm particularly proud of the work that we have been able to do with respect to standing up renewable energy on public lands. In the prior administration, not much attention was really given to the efforts of standing up renewable energy on public lands. We believe that we will join Dr. Chu and the rest of the government as we stand up a whole renewable energy revolution for America. And so we see us capturing the power of the sun in the southwest and the wind from the high plains and the wind from the outer continental shelf, especially on the Atlantic, and capturing geothermal. And to make that real, our hope is that by the end of next year, by the end of 2010, that we will have permitted on public lands over 5,000 megawatts of power that will create approximately 45,000 jobs in the American economy with these green jobs. That's a lot of jobs. Now, It's not going to be easy to get there, but we have SWAT teams of people and have opened up the permitting offices to make that a reality. And I frankly think that it is important that we make it a reality so people can see that it does in fact exist. When I go to places like California and Nellis Air Force Base, where now there is a 300 megawatt solar power plant, I know that it can be a reality, and we need to make sure that the rest of the world understands that we can make solar power a reality. So we're well on our way to doing that, and hopefully we'll get that done, at least the permits to allow construction to move forward by the deadline that Secretary Chu has given me, which is December 1 of 2010. So make sure you don't spend your money on other things so that the projects that we're standing up on public lands are able to be financed by the money that we have given you. The third point I want to make, see, I'm lobbying him while I'm talking to you. See, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Third point I want to make to all of you is that it is important to look at where the jobs are going for the future. And I think the analogy about Wayne Gretzky is exactly right. There are going to be many jobs that are going to be created in this clean energy economy. And you're right to be part of this forum as we discuss those and as you think about your future. I would also ask you to think about looking at places like the Department of Interior or the Department of Energy or the Council of Environmental Quality, where we know that in the years ahead there's going to be a great change in the workforce of our departments. I run a department that has close to 70,000 employees. In the next 8 years, think about this. In the next 8 years, 40% of that workforce is going to retire. It's going to turn over. So who do we want to come and work for us? It is people like you who care about the land and the water and the wildlife and the air and the planet that we live on. And so I would ask you not to forget about the possibility of coming and joining essentially what is the Conservation Corps of America within the Department of Interior. Indeed, we have started down that wave length already, where over the last year we have put together a program that this year has employed over 12,000 young people who are working with us in the Department of Interior. And over the next 3 years, we'll have approximately 30,000 young people that will be working with us. So any of you who are out there who are interested in working at the Department of Interior in different jobs, make sure that you get a hold of our department and our youth programs. And Ray Rivera, who is one of our champions, is helping us put that together. But I also want to take this opportunity, as I talk about jobs, to talk about a very specific point with respect to our own agenda and part of the President's agenda with respect to the entire government. And that is that we need to have the diversity because we need to be an inclusive America and include everybody in everything that we're doing. And so when I look at the young people who are assembled here in this auditorium here on the White House grounds today, I see the face of America. I see people from all kinds of different backgrounds who are here, white males and African American women and Native Americans and Hispanics. That's what we want the government, frankly, to look like, because diversity really is very important for us if we're going to maintain the strength of our nation. And I want to take this opportunity to point out someone whom I have great admiration for, because he was the first African American who ever served as the director of the National Park Service many years ago, when it was not popular, when he was still called the Negro, when he was asked to serve in that position. And that's Bob Stanton, who's one of my assistant secretaries, who's working. You are the best. But he's working very hard to stand up our youth programs within the Department of Interior and across the board with other agencies here in the department. Finally, let me just say, there's nothing more exciting to any of us who work on these issues as we work so hard on these tough issues that we are embroiled in every day, from healthcare to immigration to the clean energy future, to all the challenges that, frankly, President Obama has in his hands today. There's nothing that is more inspiring to him, to all of us here, than to see young people like you who are engaged, because you truly are the keys to the change that we dream about. So thank you for participating in this forum today.
So we're ready to take a few questions. I know that Secretary Salazar has to leave in a few minutes, but he's graciously agreed to take a couple of questions, and then we can move on. So if there are any questions here in the audience, we'll start with those first and then take them from the online participants. So why don't we start right there.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Patrice Yao, and I am...
Oh, and there are microphones going around.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Patrice Yao, and I'm currently in HR consulting. Secretary Chu, earlier you talked about how businesses, if they continue to conduct themselves as usual, we will never be able to follow the puck and to get to where we want to be in terms of clean energy. What are the incentives and what are the recommendations that you have to encourage private sector businesses to get involved in clean energy and to be corporately, socially responsible?
Very briefly, I think we give carrots. We give production tax credits, research and develop things. We give grants. The government gives grants to encourage businesses to start. We help in the research. We help in the development and the deployment. The other thing is that we also have to send certain long-term signals. The long-term signals incorporate the fact that we have to drive towards more renewable energy. So one way to draw that market out is to say the United States should have either a clean energy standard or renewable portfolio standard, which means that a certain fraction, let's say 15, 20, 25% of the energy has to come from clean, let's say wind, solar, renewable energies, as an example. Finally, we need to begin to put a cap on carbon, and that cap then ratchets down. And that's the direct thing, saying how do you actually get to, by 2020, 2030, 2040, down to 2050, get that 80% reduction. That, I think, is a crucial part of the whole package. Because without that, if I'm a utility company and I'm thinking of investing in a coal plant or a nuclear plant or wind, those investments are long-term investments. A nuclear plant will last 60 years, similar with a coal plant. Those are billions of dollars. If there's a cap and ratcheting down, that will put a price on carbon, and that will affect the decision, because that's a 60-year decision.
Next question. Oh, why don't we go right here.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. My name is Lauren Vanderpool. I'm here with my nonprofit, Vanderpool Gourmet and Healthy Living Services, and we are determined to help. Well, basically, we have a nonprofit, and we teach inner-city youth agricultural awareness, green job trainings, as well as healthy living services. My question for you is, people of color and low-income communities are disproportionately burdened with coal and nuclear power plants, chemicalized foods, bad environment, all of that, as well as economically, environmental, and health issues. What projects are in place to uplift the communities?
I'll take that to start out with, Lauren. First, what we are doing within our departments is we have the Diversity of America that actually is helping us make those decisions, and so we're sensitive to the historic issues of environmental justice and the fact that there are some communities who have borne a disproportionate share of the consequences of pollution and the consequences of industrialization. And so I think you may be hearing from her a little later on, Lisa Jackson, the head of EPA, very involved in the Brownfields program and doing a whole host of other things. But it is part of the reality that we have to face. It's not something that we ought to walk away from, and that is that the issues of pollution and what has been an energy economy that has been a failed economy has had communities of low income and communities of color bear a disproportionate burden of the consequences of that pollution.
Very quickly, the weatherization also is an issue. I think in areas of poor areas, low-income areas, the homes quite often are very badly insulated, very uncomfortable. Those people are the least able to afford the energy they need to keep their homes warm. And so we want to aggressively drive the prices down and to allow people to weatherize their homes so their money doesn't get frittered away in heating bills or cooling bills, so that they have more money in their pockets, and to make this kind of a habit. So right now, $5 billion is being spent by the federal government to weatherize homes below the 200% above poverty line as a start. But that's just a start. We want to get more and more of these.
Thank you. Are we ready for an online question?
We are ready for an online question. We have a question from Rebecca Hallbrook, who's joining us on Facebook, and she wants to know, what can the students do to help pass climate change legislation?
I'll start. You can do a lot. You can get on your parents, your aunts and uncles. I think if you look at how a habit, cigarette smoking was changed, I would say, I have to say a lot of it had to do with the younger generation that said, look, you know, that's K through 12, and people in college look at their parents and say, well, I want you around. I don't want you to die. Stop smoking. Okay, now you can say something even better. What kind of world are you going to leave me? You've got to take this seriously. You know, make your home more efficient. You can help by turning off your computer when you're not using it, but I think young people get it much sooner than the older generations, and you can apply your own pressures and your own choices to say, this is going to be very important for us because this will give us a world that we will inherit and our children will inherit.
I would say, Rebecca, three things. First, you all have voices that can be heard in the halls of Congress, and those who will be making these decisions on energy and climate change in the months ahead. And it's important that they hear from you, so each one of you could walk away with that single responsibility and do something. Number two, I would educate those around you, as Dr. Chu has just said. And number three, there are many organizations out there that are involved in this issue because they see it as a signature issue of our time. So participating with those organizations as we move forward on this agenda would be very helpful. And let me just an overarching comment, say this to all of you. There's so many people who would disagree with Dr. Chu, even though he's won a Nobel Prize in science and is one of the smartest people on the planet. The fact of the matter is that there are lots of people who say, what, you're worried about energy and about climate change? You know, it's not a real deal. In fact, if you hear many of my former colleagues in the U.S. Senate, they will still say, you know, we don't believe it. There are scientists who say that climate change is not real. So I would say educate yourself about the realities of it. For me, as the Secretary of Interior, I can fly to the Apostle Islands and Lake Superior, and I can meet with our park superintendent telling me that the temperature of Lake Superior has warmed up 5 degrees from where it was just 30 years ago. I can move over to Glacier National Park in Montana, and we are now projecting that the glaciers at Glacier National Park will completely disappear by the year 2020. I have moved down at different times into the Colorado River, into Grand Canyon, where we expect that the water flows in the Colorado River will diminish by 20% just because of the way that the climate is changing. And so when you can tell those kinds of stories, I think you become more believable. And so educate yourselves and go and spread the gospel.
Thank you. Why don't we take a question in the back, right over, young lady in white.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, my name's Rachel Cushman, and I'm Chinook native from Washington. And I have a question about nuclear energy and hydroelectric dams and coal. What about the indigenous people who are negatively affected by all of these methods? Hydroelectric dams kill salmon supplies. My people base their economy off of salmon supplies. Hanford is upstream. You know, it's not safe storing nuclear energy there. Land is being strip mined on reservations for coal. Like, what about those communities? Especially with, like, you being Secretary of the Interior, the Department or the Bureau of Indian Affairs is there. Like, what about those communities?
Rachel, it's a good question and a very important concern, and that is that we in the United States of America have a trust responsibility and a nation-to-nation responsibility to the over 500 tribes in the United States of America and Alaskan natives. And it is because the President so strongly believes that we need to turn the page in our relationship between the United States and the tribes, the sovereign tribes, that he, in the last several weeks, hosted a tribal summit in which he opened up the conference and closed it off at the end of the day. It was attended by tribes throughout the United States of America. One of the things that he did in that conference is he issued an order that required all of the federal agencies, whether it's the Department of Interior or whether it's EPA or Department of Energy, whatever we're doing, to engage in a consultation with the tribes so that their voices are also being heard. And so I think what you are going to find is in the days, months ahead, people like Assistant Secretary Larry Echohawk, who is the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, will be very engaged with the tribes of America as we deal with the clean energy revolution, which we're talking about today.
Let me also add that I think Hanford, that's a responsibility of the Department of Energy. We take that very seriously to try to clean up this. It's a legacy of World War II and the Cold War. It's going to be very costly, but in the Recovery Act, there was an additional $6 billion that were voted to spend on cleaning up not only Hanford, but other sites around the country in this Cold War legacy. But you know, on a yearly basis, it's $6 billion over 2 years, added to roughly $6 billion each year. It's a very expensive process, but that's again real money, and we take it very seriously. With regard to hydroelectric dams, there are turbines now being designed that preserve a very, very large fraction of the fish. I don't think the solution is to breach a dam and get rid of it, because there's the other thing, the long term, you have to be locally environmentally sensitive, but also there's this other issue. If the prediction of what will happen to Washington and Oregon is that if you go above roughly 70 degrees Fahrenheit in the summertime in the air temperature, the water will be too warm to support salmon. So there will be no more salmon. So if you think that getting rid of the hydroelectric dams is the solution, then where does one get your power? And so there's this thing. And so what we want to do is we want to preserve and restore, actually, let me be quite frank about this, restore the salmon runs in the state of Washington. But getting rid of the dams is you know, there are better ways. And you have to be cognizant of both the local environmental issue, but this global environmental issue as well.
So take one more question. Right there, the gentleman in the red striped tie. That's you. Yeah.
Thank you for coming to this forum today. My name is Gabriel Elsner. I work with Student PIRGs in Washington, D.C. Secretary Chu, you mentioned that China is investing over $100 billion a year in clean energy technology. I know that the President signed some agreements with the Premier last week. I'm wondering, when are we going to launch an Apollo-type program or World War II-style mobilization to create the clean energy technology that we need, like hydrogen storage, that can store our clean energy and also cut our carbon emissions at the same time?
Well,
and also, sorry, I did want to thank you, first of all, because I know that the administration has done more than any other presidential administration in history and invested more in clean energy than ever. But we need more, and we need it now.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think the amount we're investing today is simply not enough. Look upon it as this economic opportunity that I talked about. The primary energy industry, that by primary I mean, you know, how much do we spend on on oil, natural gas, coal, you name it, to generate the energy we use, it's over $1 trillion a year. We necessarily have to go transition to a high technology thing because wind and solar and all these other, all the clean energies are high technologies. In a high technology company, you're investing 20% of your revenues on R&D, okay? Well, 10% of your revenues in R&D is $100 billion a year. So we're investing a few $1 billion. So we're missing a few decimal places here. And if we are to be serious about it, we definitely have to be investing not a few, but tens of billions of dollars as a minimum, both at the federal level, but also in private companies. And again, going back to one of the earlier questions, to stimulate investment in the private companies know they have to overcome some problems, right? And then they will begin to invest in it. If they know they have to decrease their carbon emissions, they begin to invest in solutions. So it's a combination of both the private and the public. Absolutely agree with you.
Is there a chance for an Apollo-type program moving forward?
Well, it depends on, this is where you come back and make your views known to your representatives. It should be an Apollo, a commitment like that.
Well, that's all the time on this panel we have for questions. Thank you all for your great questions, and please help me thank Secretary Chu and Secretary Salazar.
Okay. Okay. Next, first I'd like to say that every single morning when I wake up and get on the metro and head to work, I feel incredibly excited at the opportunity I have to be working for this administration at this moment in history. And I think at this transformational time, creating the clean energy economy of the future, creating the environment that we know we can have, and creating the labor force, there is simply no two better people that could be leading the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Labor than Secretary Solis and Administrator Jackson. I have no doubt I also have no doubt that in 10 or 20 years, a number of you in this audience will probably be here as secretaries yourself, talking to the next generation, and I have no doubt that you will probably talk about how it was these two incredible leaders who inspired you to join this movement. So I ask you both to come up, and Administrator Jackson, I'd like to.
Well, hi. I like that introduction, John Carson. I'll take it. Good afternoon, everybody. I am so thrilled to be here. It's always good to be anywhere around my cabinet colleagues, my Green cabinet colleagues. I know you just heard from Secretary Chu. I know you heard from Secretary Ken Salazar. I saw Nancy Sutley walking out the door. So you've heard a lot, but I have more to say. So stay with me for a couple minutes because this is such an important time. Since I started this job, I've been privileged to go all over the country. I have been to solar farms. I've been to wind farms. I've seen the panels. I've traveled overseas. I've met with officials from other nations. But one of the most interesting and innovative clean energy projects that I've been privileged to see was done by high school students. Earlier this year, I visited West Philadelphia High School, where a student group there, students at that school, are building a hybrid car. The vast majority of the students at West Philly are minorities. Many of them come from the neighborhood around the school, and it is one that is poor, disadvantaged, and underserved. From this place where no one would expect it, comes something extraordinary. And that's the story of this movement. That's the story of our moment. The hybrid car that those students are building at West Philly has outperformed other cars built by teams at the most advanced and prestigious universities in our country and around the world, and some of the most highly funded private enterprises as well. These are high school students from the inner city who are taking their car to compete against other hybrid vehicles this year from around the world at the Progressive Automotive X Prize. If they win, and they have a good shot to win. In fact, they just recently made it to round 2. More than half of their competitors are gone. They'll take home $10 million. I love telling that story. It is an amazing story, but it's not the only one. That's because this is the first generation that is taking action in earnest on climate change and on clean energy. This is the first generation whose cars are likely to run on electricity. This is the first generation whose homes will be connected to a smart grid and who will get energy from wind turbines. It's the first generation that is graduating college and looking for jobs, green jobs. And you are the first generation that has not asked, but demanded that we stop the damage greenhouse gases are doing to your world. In response to your demand, we have acted. Recently, EPA and DOT announced a program to increase fuel efficiency and decrease harmful emissions from American vehicles. We finalized a rule to track greenhouse gases from the nation's largest sources, and we proposed a new rule to use the Clean Air Act to cut emissions from large sources by raising the standards for innovative clean technology on those facilities. To give you a sense of how much things have changed, I announced that proposed rule at the Governor's Climate Summit in California. I have to tell you, that summit was hosted by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and one of the speakers right before me was Harrison Ford. Today, they are two leaders in our fight for a cleaner environment, but when I was younger, maybe your age, they were the Terminator and Han Solo. So I was up on stage wondering if I was going to be the only one without my own action figure. So we're working on that. Believe me, things have changed, and they will keep on changing. And finally, EPA has submitted to the White House, our White House, the long-awaited endangerment finding on CO2. All of these efforts accompany billions of dollars for clean energy jobs in the Recovery Act, a strong push to get a clean energy and climate bill through Congress and onto the President's desk for signature. This is the first generation to make all of that possible. That's why we've asked you to join us for our conversation today. Now let me close with a word about those students back at West Philly High. They are an important example, not just because they're young, not just because they're not what you think of as entrepreneurs, but because they're not what you think of as quote-unquote environmentalists. They are part of another important change we're seeing in your generation, a change to the very heart of the environmental movement, the movement itself. To keep momentum growing behind clean energy and climate action, we have to expand the conversation on environmentalism, open it up to new kinds of environmentalists. These are people who might not, even when we start or when we're done, label themselves as environmentalists, but people whose lives are touched every day by environmental issues. They come from communities that haven't always been part of the conversation. Communities like West Philly, communities like my beloved 9th Ward in New Orleans, communities like Southeast DC. These are neighborhoods. They're neighborhoods extremely vulnerable to environmental and economic challenge. They stand to benefit the most from green jobs, the most from lower energy costs, the most from cleaner air. And they can be a powerful force for all of us in this debate. As the young leaders of the environmental movement, I challenge you to continue to expand the conversation and welcome, find, seek out, and hear those voices. Make sure that every community can be part of the unprecedented changes you are working so hard on that can be brought about by this generation. Thank you so much for being here. Can't wait to hear your questions.
Wow. She has me all fired up. How about you? You know, it's wonderful to be here with you and to know that there's so many people across this country, young people like yourselves, that are helping to pave the way to explain to other folks about what climate change, what it is to really work for improving our environment. And as someone who has worked previously in the House of Representatives, working on legislation to help green our communities and communities that are disadvantaged and sometimes are not thought of as places where you want to see particular growth occurring, but they exist. And that's where I come from. I come from a community in the San Gabriel Valley, close to East Los Angeles, and where I grew up, we had one of the largest landfills, one of the largest in the country. It's known as the Puente Hills landfill. It was very close to where I grew up. A lot of toxics spewing in the air and in the water. Many recycling, battery recycling plants and factories that would spew bad emissions and things of that nature. I knew there were cancer clusters around my neighborhood because as years went by, I could see some of our neighbors no longer living there, and friends that we had that were passing along. And I knew that there was a need for us to focus in on environmental justice. And I was able to work as a member of the state legislature in California to pass an executive order that back in 1994, I believe, President Clinton actually put forward. And what we did was codified that piece of legislation in California. But it was not an easy task. It took 3 attempts to try to get it through the House then. And it happened at that time, fortunately, when things were really bad. We had a governor that really didn't care for this whole effort to try to clean up our environment. In fact, what they would say, many business people and people in government, is that, Hilda, what are you doing? You're actually taking away the potential for jobs because of this environmental justice proposal that you want to put forward. It's going to hurt the very people that you want to help. And I said, nothing could be farther from the truth. These people want good jobs, they want clean jobs, and they want clean environments and neighborhoods. And there's nothing wrong with that. The two can be meshed together. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in the community where I grew up now. And I feel very proud that now this is taking hold because we have a whole new generation of people like yourselves and others and leaders that can finally articulate and actually push policies that have been, up to this time, hindered. And for the past 8 years, as a former member of the House, I can tell you how hard it's been, working against a past administration that really didn't want to see how far we could go with talking about and discussing climate change, making sure that all communities could partake in the advantages of cleaning up our environment, and making and believing in new jobs. And my effort now, as a member in the cabinet, is to help to implement a bill that I was involved in writing. And this is very strange, but believe it or not, the Green Jobs Bill was signed into law in 2007 by President Bush. Now that in and of itself was kind of a miracle. But the fact of the matter is, the real green president is the one that all of us helped to get elected this past year. And he's the one that's making the difference by helping to put monies into our department so that we can create job training opportunities. And job training opportunities in the green, renewable energy industry is where our future is, especially as the Department of Labor looks and has to report on what the high unemployment rates are. 10.2% overall. But for young people, for people like yourself, it's 27%. And for minority communities, it goes upwards of 30 to 40. And if you live on an Indian reservation and you happen to be a teenager, it's probably 80%. But nobody talks about that. They too want jobs. They too want renewable energy. They too want opportunities to be able to live in a clean environment and to have a career. And what we're trying to do in the Department of Labor is expose young people and people that want opportunities, not just to have a job that's going to pay you $7 or the minimum wage, but to have a lifetime career and to be able to move in and out of that career. So if you started out, for example, students that we work with in our programs, Youth Build program, for example, some of these kids lost out on a chance of a high school education, but through our programs, they get a chance to get back into education. Same time, they get job skills, they actually work on projects, and they get trained in renewable energy. And we have made it an effort through the Recovery Act money to focus in on that. And what we've asked our staff to do is to cast the net far and wide and to make sure that we get out to all of our communities. So the money isn't just going to go to the traditional groups, but it's going to go to those hard-pressed areas that don't always get to see the fact that, hey, there's some renewable projects that are coming up in my neighborhood, or maybe my school is going to look a lot different because it's going to be a cleaner building. And there's going to be other potential activities and equipment that are going to make their lives easier for them. These things don't happen overnight. They happen because we have good leadership. We have people at the EPA. We have people in the Department of Energy who are making big investments in our future. But it can pass us by if we don't take advantage of it. And I hope that all of you will be stakeholders with us to get the message back out to our communities that there's nothing wrong with getting a good job, cleaning up our environment, and seeking and making investments in our future. And part of that is by also motivating our friends and our communities and letting them know that this administration is strongly supportive of that. And one of the things I'd like to say is, while we're talking about green jobs, and I just explained just the kind of entry level, we really need more math, science, and engineers. We need people who are going to be innovative, who are going to be able to drive the competition, the global competition, so that America can lead China and India and not the other way around. And that's something that's going to create, I think, a great expectation on the part of all of us to really try to meet that standard. And it's something that I see and hear almost every day. Why is it that so many kids in our schools, public schools, drop out? They're not motivated. We're not talking to them. We're not giving them the tools they need so that they can be encouraged and think about new opportunities in green renewable energy, in biofuels. I got to visit one of our job centers, our Job Corps centers, and I met a young African-American teenager, and he was studying a trade, just a regular trade, to be a welder. And I said, well, this is great. And he said, but you know what, Secretary, what I want to do with this job? I heard that they need welders to build wind turbine engines, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to build you one. And I said, when you do, you invite me back. And that, to me, was one of the greatest things that I could hear from a young man that probably wasn't thinking initially that there were potential availabilities in these different jobs. And I'm very excited to see so many women here. Because let me tell you, there's this big misnomer about women and green jobs. And nothing could be farther from the truth, right? So I just ask you and our brothers that are there to help us, to help us make this sea change, to make the sea change. And all I can do is revert back to what someone who we all agree really gets it and understands what we need to do in the future for green jobs and renewable energy, and that's our president. And he asks us, in many occasions, are we fired up? Are you ready to go? Are you ready to go? And yes, we can, right? Well, I know we can, and I'm happy to be a part of the cabinet, to be able to be another voice along with my colleagues to talk about green jobs and making sure that that every potential is fulfilled by everyone. Even if they're senior citizens, everybody can add to helping to clean up our planet, our environment, and helping contribute to our innovation, to lead and put America first, especially when we're coming into this new 21st century potential. So I would just say thank you very much. I hope you guys have a wonderful day today. I know we're going to take some questions, and it's just exciting to see so many young people here because you indeed are the innovators. You're going to be the ones that are going to help us realize and implement a lot of the plans that we have in place now. So thank you very much. Thanks so much for having us.
Okay, let's take some questions. We'll start here in the front.
Hi, Administrator Jackson. My name is Brett Wiley. I'm working. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Is this on? Okay, great. Administrator Jackson, this is for you. My name is Brett Wiley. I'm working with Missouri Youth on behalf of the Sierra Student Coalition and the Youth Clean Energy Movement of the United States of America. And Administrator Jackson, when will the EPA deny the 79 permits for mountaintop removal coal mining?
Well, Brett, thanks for the question. First, I'm proud to say that EPA is looking at the 79 permits for mountaintop coal removal mining. That's a change. All right? That's a big change. And you can believe that. There are complex technical issues. I keep saying to folks, all people ask of the EPA is for us to do our job. And if we do our job with respect to those permits, we're going to be looking at water quality issues. Now, any process, including that one, is going to have impacts on our environment. It's our job to get in front of those and make sure that we're not enabling the kinds of concerns that we see up at Dunkard Creek in West Virginia, where because of operations over years and years, we now see fresh water that's literally more salty than ocean water because of runoff and pollution mainly from mining, but a couple of other places as well. So we're going to do our job. I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, blow smoke and say, well, we're going to deny them. I'm going to say we're going to look at each and every one of them, and we're going to make those companies sit down and realize that when you fill stream valleys, when you fill miles and miles of headwater streams, that has an impact on water quality. And the science is showing that that impact is becoming bigger and bigger, and it's our job to do something.
Okay, in the front here.
Good afternoon. My name is Marisol Becerra, and I am from the southwest side of Chicago. First and foremost, I want to congratulate the EPA because they have filed a lawsuit against the Midwest Generation. 2 of those coal power plants are located in Little Village and Pilsen, which is right where I'm from. My question is, well, first off, Secretary Chu earlier mentioned that it would be very hard for the U.S. to turn its back on coal. So my question is the coal industry more important than protecting the health of our future and long-term sustainability?
I don't believe, I'll go first, but I know you. I wasn't here for Secretary Chu's statement. I was on the Hill, quick advertisement, testifying about chemical management reform. I know you're all clean energy and environmental advocates, but talk about public health and chemical safety in this country. I just had to put in a little bit of a word for the importance of that issue. Just put it right back here when you're done changing the world on energy and climate. Listen, to me, that is a false choice. I have a career that's getting longer and hair that's getting grayer because I have talked till I'm blue in the face that no community ever should be said, well, would you like clean water or would you like a job? How about air? Would you like to breathe or would you like a job? And energy is all the same way. This is about a transition. And I think if we're pragmatic, we can acknowledge that a transition is not something that happens like this. You don't turn off a light switch on a source of energy for our country that right now whole states, some states are 95% plus dependent on coal for energy. What this is about is saying that carbon has a price. It's actually not a price I'm probably going to live long enough to really pay, but my children will, and my grandchildren will. And the best way to make the market stop fighting us, make the economy work with us on what we're trying to do, is put a price on that. And whether it's from the extraction process, the mining process, all the way through the burning process, all the way through the disposal process, I believe it's part of our job to be honest through the regulatory process about what those costs are to society. So at EPA, we're going to continue to move towards being guardians of the air, the water, and the land. My belief is if we do our job, it's not going to hurt industry. It's going to move us to something different, to change us. And that's what I think we have to do.
Christine, do we have an online question?
We do. So this is from our live Facebook users who, we have a question from Duncan Reed who wants to know, I think this is probably best for Administrator Jackson, but how will the U.S. realize our global responsibility by addressing the effects of climate change on countries that have not contributed to carbon emissions but will be adversely affected by climate change?
Well, that's a big part of the story, right, Duncan? The way you start is by first acknowledging you have a problem, you know? And I'm really proud. I cannot tell you how proud I am to be part of an administration that acknowledges that this is a concern. Through all the, I'm going to use a very highly technical term, fuzz in the system out there about whether or not the science is questionable. I haven't seen anything that makes me in any way believe that the overwhelming consensus about the need for us as a planet to address this issue has changed. This is the issue of our future in terms of our prosperity and sustainability as a planet, not a country, not a state, not a community, a planet. And as far as the global implications of that, you know, international treaties, EPA is a hard job. Maybe I'm grateful every day that I'm not trying to negotiate the international treaty. That'll be hard. That work will be very, very tough. But what's absolutely critical is giving this administration, giving our negotiators, giving our country a leg to stand on. And I'm really proud of the role that we've played at EPA, along with the rest of the cabinet, Hilda's efforts at labor to move us on the labor side, Stephen's efforts at energy. But I'm so proud to have done all we can so far to change the direction in terms of just acknowledging and stepping up to the plate on this issue.
Okay, on the side here.
Thank you very much. Achille West with Reclamation Energy, LLC. And I am, I guess, originally from one of those underserved communities of Anacostia in southeast Washington, D.C., where we have a river that runs through it. And it's a polluted river. And it's being polluted by all types of tributaries that feed into it, and companies and industries that feed into it. Now, my concern is that for my community, that there's not just green jobs, because what we see, or what we project, is a spike in green jobs over the next 5 years or so, 10 years. Maybe something like a golf club, if you will. And then it'll come right back down because everything will be audited and everything will be winterized or weatherized or what have you. So what we want to focus more on in Southeast DC and DC more generally, and what I think we should be focusing on as a nation, is green industry. And it feeds into what we were talking about in terms of keeping the United States at the forefront. If we're able to export industry throughout the world, if we're able to export expertise, then we stay on top. And if it's climate, and if it affects the climate in a good way, then we're really on top. So I guess my question is, a lot of the big boys, whether they be workforce development programs or whether they be people who get federal money, they have easy access to you all. They have easy access to discuss their ideas, and they have easy access to capital. How do we get access to homegrown ideas that will be sustainable, that we know will be sustainable in our communities, and to generate industries, because that's the harbinger for jobs, well-paying jobs. And then I guess the last thing is with regards to the environment. And I wanted to ask Energy Secretary Chu this, but I'll ask you, Administrator Jackson. The Department of Energy seemed to be talking out of two sides of their mouth earlier this year when they spoke about hydrogen. On the one hand, they said, well, hydrogen's not going anywhere as it regards to vehicles. On the other hand, they gave Sprint $7 million to build out their backup system, to back up their network with a hydrogen fuel cell infrastructure rather than diesel generator. So we know that hydrogen makes up over 90% of the atoms in the universe. It's clean, it burns clean, and produces clean water as a result. So why are we overlooking the most abundant thing that's right here in front of our eyes that'll solve all of our problems? along with the sun, it's the battery that we never had. You can take water and sun, which is what our planet has, and create hydrogen and thus energy. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, let me address the issue about where we go from here. And as I tried to explain, creating jobs and opportunities, that's one thing, but we're looking at a vast more opportunities, careers. So it isn't just coming in on the front end and learning how to weatherize a home. Maybe that's one part of greening our communities. But we want people to be able to start up their businesses. We've got a whole stock of homes and commercial buildings that have to be retrofitted. And I know that there's $5 billion that's being made available right now for weatherization. I can't tell you how far behind we are in terms of training people, whether it's at the entry level or even at a higher level, someone who's going to do the meter installation so you can actually gauge when your energy power is going up and how you can work through your computer at your office to make sure you can regulate that and bring it down, saving money, putting power back into the grid. So many things that we're involved in right now that we're just at the tip. We're just barely starting. And I can tell you that in one of our efforts through the Department of Labor, you see all these people that lost their jobs in the automobile industry. Well, the Vice President just announced the opening of a plant that we have now helped to open up, and they'll be producing hybrid vehicles. So I think there's a whole lot of opportunity that isn't just going to last within the span of the Recovery Act itself. Our investments are for 20 and 30 years. Recently, I visited Las Vegas, and we were able to give a grant, a large, well between about $500 million in that area, and it would go to help start the infrastructure, what we call the smart grid system. Now, not all states are participating, but let me tell you, there's a whole lot of jobs available there. And if we start neighbor by neighborhood and by state, there's going to be a long-term effect in terms of job growth, career opportunities, but also businesses. Because all the secondary level businesses that have to provide assistance to these startup facilities are really, I think, is where the action is going to be. And I know that the SBA, Department of Energy, are making tremendous investments right now. And my concern is that we make sure we go to those communities that don't always have the benefit and aren't at the table. So let us know, give us feedback too on how we can improve that. Get a hold of me through dol.gov and give us your ideas, because we can always do better, we can always learn. And keep in mind, for some of us, in my own agency, we've been starved for the last 8 years. I can't tell you what a refreshing sense and feeling that I get that now I can give out monies to targeted areas to make really good systematic changes in the way we deliver our services, but also making sure that the environment is a big priority for us. And that has never happened in the Department of Labor.
You had the hydrogen question. I'm not going to let go. I know what John's going to tell me, which is, and I think the smarter thing to do is get the question to energy so they can give you the real answer. Although I was totally sitting here thinking, like, let me just be the Secretary of Energy for a second. I will not do that to Stephen Chu. Although I will say that, you know, there are applications where it makes sense. Obviously, the hydrogen issue is all about infrastructure. And something like a post office or a Sprint, you can see why the infrastructure is easier to build. I just want to leave one other piece of sort of collective wisdom. Over time, over and over again, you do this long enough as I have, you see that no matter what the environmental issue, whether it was clean water, toxic substances, Superfund, the industry estimates, the naysayer estimates, when industry plays a naysayer, and they don't always, we have some good industries out there, are always dramatically higher than what it actually ends up costing to do it. The Clean Air Act, the acid rain program, almost any program, and none of which are coming to mind because I'm getting kind of tired. The reason isn't because we underestimate, and the reason isn't because nobody can figure out the economics. The reason is you. The reason is once regulation and legislation come into play, entrepreneurs take over. All you need is a strong signal that this is now the way it's going to be. And then all of a sudden, all those things that looked absolutely unreachable become investment opportunities, and then you just want government to get out of your way. So that's the possibility here. When I hear you say, well, there's going to be a spike in weather rates, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we only have so many houses, thank goodness. But, you know, we can build them and they're there and we got to do what we got to do. Something else is going to come along. There are going to be opportunities. I don't even know what they are. And then there's all the renewable power, which prices of which will come down. So it's you. It's all of you guys who stand to benefit in terms of entrepreneurial opportunities, all of which, you know, should be there for you.
Okay, let's go to the back. You? Yeah. There.
Hi, my name's Ria Tazwell. Here? Yeah, all right. And I'm a student from North Carolina. I'm also one of the hundreds of thousands of young Americans that voted to see clean energy last November. And my question is geared towards either of you. I acknowledge this might not directly fall under your job descriptions, but I'd appreciate your insight nonetheless. Climate scientists suggest that we're approaching a threshold in which the amount of carbon in the atmosphere enacts a rapid, irreversible, and dramatic shift in climate. If not in Copenhagen, when and where can we expect to see the fair, ambitious, and binding climate treaty that is needed to avoid a catastrophic climate change?
Obviously, that doesn't come directly under my agency, but as someone who's been an advocate and involved in environmental issues as a former member of the House and served with very distinguished members like Congressman Markey, who heads a select committee on global warming and energy independence, and had a chance to visit Greenland with the Speaker of the House to see what was happening with our ice caps, and to visit different communities around the world in India to see where advances are being made, necessary advances and changes. I can tell you that there's an urgency for all of us in this global world to do something. And I believe that we still have some time that we have to take here to convince some of the naysayers that you heard about earlier that still believe that this is a myth. In fact, in that committee that I used to serve on with Congressman Markey, the ranking member on the opposing side doesn't believe that climate change is a reality. And in fact, I heard one of our colleagues today who went up before the committee to testify was just berated because there was no agreement on what our understanding is. And we're basing our information on facts and science. So I'm just telling you that there are people within the administration who feel very strongly, and that we're going to continue to be voices as long as I'm a part of the task force here on the green efforts. I'm going to try to do everything I can to help educate and provide opportunities for people so that we can lower our carbon footprint. That is a reality. When you see hurricanes, Katrina, when you see brush fires in California in November, I mean, there are things that are happening around us, and some people just don't get it, but I think a lot of you can be very helpful in making sure that we can articulate this information clearly to other people like yourselves that will join us and be a voice to help persuade Congress and the Senate and others to understand that change needs to happen now.
And I just want to say, I don't know an answer to the particular question, but I think I know the answer. Be persistent. I get educated, stay involved. It's never been more important. Your vote was extraordinarily important. Your vote is always important. That part of the democratic process is important. But this battle, this struggle, all struggles don't go to, you know, the minute. They never end quickly. This is about persistence in understanding how important it is to be involved now and over the coming months. So I know that for many of us, Copenhagen is and was quite a moment. A lot of things happened between the day we all voted and this day here and the next couple of weeks. All that's great, and there have been tremendous amounts of progress. I know we sometimes focus on the non-progress, but there has been tremendous amounts of progress. And what happened last November a year ago is why it happened. So be persistent in your advocacy, thank you for that, and in your involvement.
Well, that is all the time we have for questions. I want to thank Administrator Jackson and Secretary Solis so much for their time. Well, soon we are going to get a chance to sit down in smaller breakout groups and talk. But before we do, I just wanted to acknowledge a couple people who are here. First of all, our co-conveners who've helped make this a reality, Greg Nelson from the Office of Public Engagement and Amy Salzman from Council on Environmental Quality. And I also think it's important that you get a chance to see the incredibly talented and many young people that we have working here for this administration. First, from our own office at the Council on Environmental Quality, I'll say your names, please stand up so everyone can see you, but we'll hold the applause to the end so we can get on to our breakout sessions. Tarek Shah, Allison Zellman, Dan Kilduff, Kira Mestig, Courtney Height, Bailey Dixon, and Christina Freundlich from the Office of Council on Environmental Quality. Is Rachel Irwin here from the internship program here at the White House? No. From the Department of Energy, Robert Fee and Lauren Rodman, Brandon Hurlbut, and Rebecca Levin. Okay. From DOI, Nate Hunt and Jonathan Jourdain. From Labor, Nicole Willis and Dr. Gabby Lemus. From EPA, Brendan Gillifin and Shira Sternberg, and from the State Department, Kate Larson. So you are our generation. I hope I still get to say I'm in the same generation as you. We are well represented here. But finally, from the State Department, I'd like to call up Billy Gross, who's going to say a few words about engagement during the Copenhagen events coming up.
Thank you very much. I am the Public Affairs Specialist for the Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. And it's an honor to have been invited to this event because the passion and commitment of young leaders like you is so important to the work that is being done to find a solution to the global challenge of climate change and building a clean energy economy. I know many of you will be going to COP15 in Copenhagen, and so I just wanted to talk to you briefly about some of the exciting things that we are going to be doing at this year's COP. For the first time, the U.S. Department of State, in coordination with the White House and multiple federal departments and agencies, is organizing and hosting a U.S. Center at COP15 in Copenhagen. The U.S. Center will host over 70 events during the conference that will highlight the strong actions the U.S. is taking at home and the leadership role the U.S. is pursuing internationally to combat global climate change. The events will cover topics such as greening U.S. aviation, advancing carbon sequestration technology, oceans and ecosystems in a changing climate, and many, many more. These events will be streamed live on the web, and some will involve live chats where we will take questions from around the world. Links to the live stream and chats will be available on the Department of State's COP15 website, which I understand you have a link. The link to that is on your resource fact sheet that you were given. We have also created a Facebook page for the conference, which will also have links to the live stream, as well as other real-time information being generated from the conference. In addition, we will be blogging and tweeting from the conference via the State Department's official blog, DipNote. Links to DipNote and Twitter and the Facebook page are all available on the COP15 website. I will be managing the Facebook page directly and providing the tweets and the updates to the DipNote blog. And I encourage you all to follow our activities, and if you're in Copenhagen, please come by the U.S. Center, see all the exciting things that we are doing, and give us your feedback, share your thoughts and ideas, and I will see you in Copenhagen.
Okay, first of all, I would also like to give a very special thank you to someone who helped make this event possible, Hannah Lee from the Office of Energy and Climate Change. She has worked very hard to put this together. We are now going to head into our breakout groups. First, for all of you hopefully still following us at home online, I'd like Christine to tell us a little bit about the breakout group that will be going on Facebook.
Sure. For those of you who are at home joining us online on Facebook, we're going to, please stay tuned because we're going to have a live Facebook chat with myself and Greg Nelson. So we're looking forward to answering your questions, and we'll get to some of the questions that were asked during the forum that we didn't get to. So that will start in about 5 minutes.
Okay, and now I believe each of you received a card with a number on it. We are now going to have the leaders of the breakout groups will be holding up a little sign announcing where you can convene to all head to your breakout room, and please make sure that you're back here in your seat so we can start again at 7 o'clock. Thanks so much.